This is Season 5 of Flute Unscripted. Hi, I'm your host, Caity Massoud, and I sit down with a new artist every week and share their stories with you. This podcast is brought to you by Flute Center of New York, the marketplace for flutes. Join us, subscribe, rate, and review us. Use this podcast promo code LISTEN for some special perks. Get $50 off any flute or accessory purchase of $4.99 or more, and 10% off any sheet music order, including free shipping on all orders over $50. Once again, that's code LISTEN. Robert Langevin is the Principal Flutist of the New York Philharmonic. For holding one of the most coveted and respected principal flute chairs in the world, Robert still remains calm, cool, and collected in all things. His playing is effortless, and he is known to be especially easy to work with. He was certainly very easy to chat with as well, and our interview was held at Juilliard, in between Robert's lessons for the day. He is energized by teaching and is generous and patient, yet still meticulous with his students. Robert believes the future of music lies in the next generation of up-and-coming musicians, and that young people offer something exciting and invigorating to an orchestra. He is particularly passionate about the Orchestral Program at Manhattan School of Music and takes his students under his wing to competitively train and even sometimes sub alongside him in the Phil. As a result, Robert is shaping his young pupils into inspiring, talented, and extremely successful flutists in their own right. Robert, thanks so much for letting me take your time up and chatting with me today.
It's my pleasure.
And I know your schedule's really jam-packed right now. You're kind of at the end of the teaching cycle. All the semesters are wrapping up. We're actually here in Juilliard right now. And you're, of course, the principal flutist of the Phil. You're doing touring with them, right, over the summer?
Yes.
That's going to start up. When you first joined the orchestra in 2000, did you feel any pressure at the time that you just started fresh at the job? Any pressure to maybe fill shoes that
well, it's interesting because I had a year's leave of absence from the Pittsburgh Symphony. Maris Janssens, who was the music director then, was kind enough to give me a year off. So in a way, I didn't feel like I had any pressure because I thought, if it doesn't work out here, I'll just go back there.
Yeah.
So I was really enjoying myself. I really had a great time from the very beginning.
It's like a nice chill way to slowly.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like, I guess if it had been my first job, I would have felt a lot more pressure.
No. And you said before that you really thought the style in Pittsburgh and New York just felt like a natural fit for you. You just blended right in.
Yes.
What would you say then your style really is? What are the characteristics, the pinnacles of your sound?
You mean the style of the orchestra?
For you, more personally you, like how do you think, what would you say your...
Well, for me, it was more a difference from going from my first job in Montreal to Pittsburgh, because Montreal was famous, I don't know if that's probably still the case, but at the time as a French orchestra, and the playing was much more delicate and much more subtle. And when I went to Pittsburgh, I remember Lauren Mazzella was the music director, calling me in his office after 4 or 5 weeks. He had been there at the beginning of the season, and he said, "Now I'm leaving, I'm going away for a few months." But he said, you blend very much with the others, and you play in tune, but just remember that you're a soloist, and just don't be afraid to. So that was one big difference. Whereas when I left Pittsburgh and came here, I felt it was exactly the same style. So I didn't feel like I had to make any adjustments from that point of view.
Do you feel like you yourself have a have like the core pillars of what you try to pull out of your own playing, things that make people come to you to study with you? Like when they think of Robert Langevin, what do you think you want people to think of?
Oh, I honestly haven't thought about that.
Well, because I don't think it's enough for you just to be the principal flutist of the Phil. I mean, that obviously is going to attract a lot of attention for you, but I think you have something in your own playing that attracts people as well. I was just wondering if you had any perspective on that yourself, or like you said, maybe you just don't think about it.
I think you should ask my students, because I have no idea. I just play the way I think it should sound like, you know.
Yeah. Well, I've heard you're very detail oriented, or you know how to like have a solution to every problem, that nothing seems insurmountable. If there's something tricky, you have just figure out a way to make it work.
I mean, I try to, you know, over the years, I guess it takes a long time to realize how things work. You know, when you're young, or when I was a young student, I played a lot of things without really thinking about it. And then when you start teaching, then you have to start thinking, oh, how does this work?
Yeah.
So over the years, you know, the accumulation of that, I guess, that knowledge starts making things clearer in your mind. And, you know, I guess it comes so gradually that it's not something that you really think about.
Yeah, you know? I wanted to go back to your roots a little bit. You started out on flute at 12.
Yes.
Some of your first gigs as a student were as a session artist in Toronto, right? Did you do
Montreal.
some session work? Oh, in Montreal. Okay,
yes.
Great. What was that experience like? And at that time, did you have your sights always set on being an orchestral musician?
No, it's interesting. I remember I started at 12. The first, I guess the first paying job I did was playing in the pit for My Fair Lady.
Wow. In
my hometown. And I thought, oh, this is really wonderful. You know, I mean, I was 14 and you're earning money and you're playing, you know, interesting music. And then I did have a few friends who wrote music for either movies or documentaries. There was something in Quebec called the National Film Board. Well, I guess in Canada because it's national. But they had a studio in Montreal, and I started doing recording sessions for them for different things, documentaries, movies. And I remember the first time I heard myself on a playback, I was kind of taken aback because I never heard myself. But I really enjoyed it.
Taken aback in a good way or a bad way?
Well, I had no idea what I sounded like.
Yeah.
So, and then, so I did a fair amount of that while I was studying at a conservatory. And then I thought, you know, I probably would enjoy being a studio musician because there was, you know, a fair amount of work at the time. And I thought, yeah, this is really, I'm really enjoying this. So it all came, you know, kind of haphazardly. I mean, I did not say at some point I want to be an orchestral musician, but then in my last year at the conservatory, I started subbing with the Montreal Symphony. They were doing deafness in Chloe, and they needed somebody to play alto flute. And I was 19 years old. And I mean, of course, I had played in the school orchestra. I had done some orchestra. I never played deafness. And I didn't even own an alto flute. Yeah. So I went to the local store and bought an alto flute. And the reason why they asked me to do it was that they had asked, well, a number of freelance players in town. Everybody was busy doing the ballet, doing other things. So they finally called my teacher, who used to be in the orchestra, but he was retired from the orchestra. And they said, you know, we can't find anybody. Is there somebody you can recommend? So that's how I started. And I really enjoyed it. And I thought, but still I didn't mind that it was probably too competitive and I probably would not have a chance. So I thought, but if I can earn a living being a studio musician, I'll be very happy. Yeah. So after I graduated from the conservatory, I went to study with Aurèle Nicolet for 2 years, and then with Maxence Larieux. And even then, I thought, I'm just going to try to learn as much different things as I can so that I can do anything. Nicolette worked on contemporary music, which I had really not done very much before. And then after I was done in Switzerland with Darius, I came in because there was an audition for associate principal in Montreal, and by then I thought, this would be my dream job, to work in basically what was my hometown, where I'd studied. And I made the finals, but they did not hire anybody. And they had already had, I think, I'm not sure, 3 auditions. Some of them I didn't take because I was in Europe. But they said, well, we'll offer you temporary contract until the next audition because we need somebody. So I played with them for from January to May. And then the next audition was in May. And then I was lucky enough to win that audition. Yeah. And to me, that was like my dream job. Yeah. I was lucky. I felt to get my dream job as my first job because that was all. All
that's all anyone can hope for.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So at the time that you were in Europe, did you feel like that was? I know you said you're really open-minded, but did winning that prize kind of feel like a free ticket to a world of possibilities opening up to you?
Yeah, because it gave me a scholarship to study in Europe, and at the time I thought, if I find a job in an orchestra in Europe or something, I thought, maybe I could live in different countries, and I just didn't have anything.
You're young.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It feels like the Phil itself, the flute section, has kind of gone through a transformation lately, holding auditions and everything like that. It's exciting that more and more young people are winning jobs in the orchestra, and in the flute section. I mean, even recently the auditions. Do you think that young people in general are bringing a renewed perspective to these groups, and that it's a good thing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, young people have energy, and I mean, I remember back when when I started working, I just wanted to play as much as I could. I mean, everything. I think it's good to have new blood, and yeah, absolutely.
You feel that way about conductors too, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we had a former conductor who was kind of, I won't name him, it was kind of put out that did not renew his contract after 8 years. And once I was talking to him casually, about something else, and he complained to me about it. I said, I think that music director of an orchestra should be like President of the United States. Yeah. 2 terms, and that's it. And then you change, no matter how good the person is. I mean, I think for the public it's good to get, because every conductor has his own repertoire. Yeah. But after 8 years, you've heard his repertoire. And for the musicians also, they know, what he wants. And I think it. And if every orchestra did that, then conductors would go from one orchestra to another. And, it wouldn't be a problem.
Right.
Because I don't think it's healthy for a conductor to be there for 25 years.
Yeah.
I know it has happened in some orchestras, and I know that I heard from those people that they were very depressed.
Yeah.
The morale was very low, and it's the same thing. Like when you study with a teacher, you may feel that after 3-4 years, it's time to go study with somebody else. You don't study with just one teacher for 12-15 years.
Yeah. Different perspective.
Yeah.
Do you think that your approach to playing personally has kind of changed over the years playing with the Phil? Have you reached like a new level of maturity?
I hope. I mean, I think you learn, from working with different conductors, and we're lucky enough to have good guest conductors in addition to good music directors. So, I think that, as you get older, you get more distance, and things become clearer, I think. Yeah, I mean, I always welcome a conductor giving me a suggestion, because I don't want to play a solo the same way for 20 years. I don't think that's very interesting. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I wish the conductor would say, "Oh, why don't you try that or do this?" Or
just so you could play a little bit, with the imagination.
Yeah.
Just to talk about teaching a little bit, you teach here at Juilliard, MSM, and then over the summers you're at Orford.
Yes.
And a lot of your students, especially at MSM in the orchestral program, seems like they get the opportunity to sub a lot with you in the Phil, and it's more of a European tradition. I feel like there's an evolution over there where you go from student to being familiar with the group to naturally kind of fitting in with the group. Do you think that this is something you'd like to see more principal flutists of major orchestras doing, kind of taking their students under their wing a little bit more? It's a big opportunity.
Yeah, I don't know how other people do it, but what I like about that program at MSM is the kind of program that I wish had existed when I was a student.
Yeah.
Because somebody who wants to be an orchestral player, I think it's a really great program, and I'm able to invite every semester a visiting flutist from an orchestra who comes here, and we have all the orchestras coming to New York, do a master class.
Right.
So they have perspective from different people. And I mean, the reason I bring them in to sub when I feel they're ready, I mean, some of them I have not because I didn't feel they were ready, but most of them by now, and of course the level gets better every year, so by now most people who get into the program are ready for it. Because, you know, a lot of European orchestras have academies, like the Berlin Philharmonic, the Bavarian Radio, the Concertgebouw, I mean, a number of them, and where they have literally, I think, 1 or 2 players with them for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I mean, we don't have that here, and I'm sure a big part of it is financial.
Right.
But I try to do it on a unofficial way because I feel that it's good training.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even if it's only a week or 2, I feel it's part. I mean, that program at MSM is very competitive. I mean, it has become so competitive that last year I was remarking to my colleague who was sitting with me listening to the auditions that I said, you know, anybody who gets into this program now is at a level that person would probably advance to the semifinals of the Philharmonic.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I feel it's sort of...
Do you think it kind of is almost feeding its own success in a way that maybe it's a lot to do with confidence? Like, you know, if you get into a program like this and you're studying with someone like yourself and you get that opportunity, it's almost like, well, I can do anything. And then it gives you this boost of...
I hope.
Yeah.
I hope that's the case. And I must say that I'm delighted to see that the big majority of people who have come out of that program have won jobs.
Yeah,
and some of them are on their 2nd or 3rd job.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's why we're...
It's the goal of the program.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Yeah.
When Robert isn't teaching or performing with the Phil, he takes a break from the flute and puts it away for a well-deserved hiatus every summer. He uses the time off to recharge and inspire himself, with lots of family time, tennis, books, and long drives in his sports cars. Every September, his busy routine of lessons, concerts, and solo performances starts up again. With the start of his latest new season, the Phil will welcome new members from summer auditions, and Robert shared with me what music directors look for behind the screen. In auditions for all instruments, Robert has noticed that it is important to focus on the details of the score, but never at the expense of playing with personality and connecting with the listener. In masterclasses, I've heard you talking about playing more in the style of a composer to get a feel of the repertoire. So you're not just playing like the Mozart concerto over and over. Maybe you're playing the quartets.
Yeah.
It seems very super obvious, but when I heard you say this in a masterclass, it kind of clicked for me. I was like, oh yeah, why don't I do more of that? It's very simple, but it makes a lot of sense. When students are preparing for auditions, do you advise them to kind of do this style, to play other repertoire at the same time to kind of keep them fresh and see the big picture?
Yes, and you know, it's interesting because we had auditions in the last few months.
Yeah.
2 weeks in a row. 1 week was flute and the other week was English horn. And it's, I mean, I knew that before, but it struck me this time that people who played in the finals, because, you know, the music director is there only for the finals.
Right.
The committee listens behind the screen for the 1st and 2nd rounds, but for the finals, and it's the music director's decision. He's the one who hires the player. We're there just for, I don't know, to look good.
Yeah.
I mean, some music directors want the musician's advice and then they decide. But in this case, in both cases for the flute and English horn, once we heard the finals, he said, "This is who I want."
And was that kind of who the committee had decided ahead of time too? Did you feel like you were agreeing?
Yeah, I mean, an agreement. Yeah. But it struck me that, especially in the finals, maybe because the music director is there, but the kind of playing that he was looking for is the kind of playing that you hear in international competitions, in final rounds.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to encourage all my students to do international competitions because that's the kind of playing that often conductors like.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So it's interesting because a conductor doesn't care if somebody makes a mistake.
Yeah.
And like, in first and second rounds where you have the committee, everybody is there listening to music and it's kind of, being under a microscope.
Yeah.
But in the end, for him, it's the way the person plays, musically, and it's all about the music. It has nothing to do. He doesn't know. I mean, this particular one is violin. A lot of them are violinists or pianists. They don't know if somebody has great low register
like
or
articulation
good
in measure 5. Yeah.
They don't care. They don't care. And it's interesting because I was talking to a former music director once. They had cello auditions, section cello, and they had not hired anybody. And I said to him, "Couldn't you find?"
Really? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, really. For the section, he said, in the finals they had to play. It was one of the Strauss excerpts. I can't remember if it was Heldenleben or Don Juan. I can't remember which one. But he said, I said to the candidates, "Give me all you've got. I don't care if you play wrong notes. I just give me what you've got." And he said nobody did it. And even for a section position, he would not hire somebody because he felt that everybody, even section players, should contribute to the whole ensemble.
Right. Interesting.
It's good to know because, people, and I try to tell that to students because sometimes people are so focused on playing perfectly at the expense of, and I think that, in the first round, you have to be a little conservative because if you're all over the place, it's probably not going to work.
Right.
But I think once you get to the finals, then you should, imagine you're playing a recital. Don't worry if there is a mistake somewhere. That's not what's important. The conductor wants to hear personality. He wants to get a connection with who is playing.
It's almost like you have to have a different approach then to each round, how you're going to perform.
Yeah.
You've also remarked that there are never more than really a select few people that really pay attention, though, to the details on the page in finals. What do you think is going wrong for most people in the practice room, that they're missing those details?
I don't know, but what I think is a good way to do it is to record yourself. I remember when I was preparing auditions, I would record myself every day. I would play a part of the list. I would break up the list in 3, 4, depending how long it was, so that I could concentrate on just a few pieces. But because it's time consuming to record yourself and go back and listen. But I think it's, in the long run, it's very beneficial because you hear right away if there's something wrong. You hear it. I mean, I know in my case, I would be listening back and I would think, I thought I was making dynamic contrast here.
Yeah.
And I'm not hearing, things like that you think you're doing, but you're not
coming across.
or it doesn't come across.
Yeah.
So by recording yourself, in a way you become, and I remember one of my teachers telling me, the tape recorder will be your best teacher.
Yeah.
Because you can really hear. I mean, it's always easy when you listen to somebody else to hear what's wrong.
Yeah.
But when you're playing, because you're busy playing, you don't have the distance.
It's like multitasking. You can't actually do both things.
I mean, you can't sit, way over there and listening while you're here playing.
Right.
So I think that's very useful. And nowadays, I mean, you can't even record with your phone.
Right. It's very easy, very accessible.
Yeah.
You also like performing works when you're playing as a soloist that are a little bit less known, a little bit more obscure.
Yeah.
What at the very moment is interesting to you and that you wish you heard more people performing? And
you mean as far as repertoire?
Yeah. Is there anything like currently that you're excited about?
Well, I mean, when I go to hear a flute recital, I always hope to hear at least one piece I don't know.
Yeah.
To discover. And I mean, ever since I remember when I started working, I was in a chamber group in Montreal, and we had a flute, clarinet, string trio, and piano. So we did different combinations. Once in a while, we'd have a guest player, but we decided, I don't know how we did it, but because we would get together to make the program of the season. I think we had 6 concerts per season, and we decided that on each program we'd play a piece by a Canadian composer. So I would go every year to there was a Canadian Music Center where there was a huge library. They had recordings, they had a lot of music, and so I would look for combinations that would work with what we had, and I would listen to a lot of stuff, and I've always had that interest of finding. But it has to be good music. I mean, I won't play something that I don't believe in.
Right.
But things that maybe are not so well known. And I have this gripe, even about orchestras.
Yeah.
I mean, it baffles me that an orchestra will play the Tchaikovsky 4th, 5th, and 6th symphonies over and over. The first 3, not so often. Or same thing with Dvorak, the 7, 8, and 9, but the first
Nothing
6
else,
never.
yeah.
Or Schubert, or... I mean, it's... I don't understand why that happens. I mean, in a city like New York, where you have a lot of audience that is curious, I mean, why not program things that are not so known,
right?
But are good.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the time, I listen to music. It's when I'm in the car when I commute. And the other day, I heard the Symphony Number 2 by Weber. I didn't even know Weber had written symphonies, and I'm thinking, why are we playing this?
Yeah.
And I remember with past music directors sometimes talking to them like that. I said, I was in the car last week and I heard this symphony by Bizet, which I didn't know. It was called Roma. Do you know this piece? And the director said, no. I was like, I mean, if somebody said to me, I've heard this really great flute piece on radio, and I go right away looking for it, and I would want to hear it and maybe perform it. I just don't understand that.
Yeah, I don't either.
It baffles me.
Yeah, I feel the same as you. And when I play, I personally also like to find little hidden treasures and things that are really enjoyable that maybe not a lot of people have listened to, because I think on both ends, it's more fun as the performer to know you're giving someone something fresh, and it's exciting that they don't have preconceived notions about how it's going to go.
Yeah.
And also as an audience member, it's exciting to, we're going to hear something different, not just the Poulenc again or the Prokofiev again, something that's just a little bit different.
Well, about 3 years ago, I did a recital for the Flute Club, and I was kind of...
Is that with the Harburg? Is that a man?
No, that's last year. That was just over a year ago. No, I played the Grieg Third Violin Sonata, the Jongen Sonata, and a piece by Connaisson that was written. And all 3 pieces were new to me. But I had in mind for years to play the Grieg, but somehow I never found the time to do it. And I was so pleased to hear that Pat Zuber, who was at the time president of the Flute Club, said, I went to a recital and I heard all the pieces I had never heard them before. And I thought, well, that's... And I think they're good pieces, but I think that's what makes it interesting.
Yeah. Do you think it's also then healthy to be transcribing music from other instruments as well? I know some people shun that a little bit. It wasn't written for flute, but if it brings new music
I
to
think,
the
because the flute has a limited repertoire in the Romantic period.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of violin pieces like the Franck, the Fauré, Pierne, and the Franck and the Pierne were even transcribed by the composer for the flute. the Schubert arpeggione. I mean, I think that, the pieces, these pieces work really well for the flute because the writing is very melodic. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, frankly, it's better music than we have.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have a single piece that is good as a Franck sonata.
Yeah.
So
why not?
Yeah, and I remember when I first played that, thinking, "Oh my God, this is such incredible music." By the way, did you hear the recital by the flutist from Vienna, Karl-Heinz Schütz? His recital for the flute club.
No.
Same thing. He played the arpeggione, but he played. And he played some things I had never heard. And that's what makes me want to go hear a concert.
Yeah.
I mean, if I see a program of everything I know, I'm much less likely to go than... Because if I see something, I thought, oh, I want to hear that.
Right.
This kind of... And I think it should be like that for orchestral concerts also.
You think they're scared, though, that they'll turn away audience members?
Yeah, but come on. Yeah. I mean, if you play a known piece in the second half, you can't play something unknown the first half.
Balance, right? Yeah.
I remember when I was in Pittsburgh one year, and I said that to people here in the management, that Marius Janssens, who was very creative, decided that on every program, every subscription program that both he and guest conductors would do, he would have what he called a mystery piece. So it was not announced. And it could be played as an overture, it could be played as an encore, it could be played in the middle of the program. And it was, the only thing was that it was related to one of the composers on the program. It could be an unknown piece by one of the composers who were playing, or there was always some connection. And and they would not announce it.
Well, that makes it exciting. I could see.
Yeah, and I tell you, the audience members were so excited that they would say, "I wonder what's going to be the mystery piece this week."
I have to be there to
hear what it created a real, suspense.
Yeah.
And it made people. And I remember one week it was André Previn who was conducting, and the mystery piece, we were doing some Ravel in the second half. The mystery piece was Afternoon of a Faun. I mean, some pieces were known, some were unknown, but he just said to the audience, he said, "It's probably a piece you know, but I want you to know that I think that this is the perfect piece. There's not one note too many, one note too few, and we're going to play it now."
Yeah. Really have them on the edge of their seat that way too.
Yeah. I mean, it was terrific.
Yeah.
And I don't know why other orchestras don't do it, man.
It seems to like a idea that would work to me. It entices me to want to go. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I said to somebody once, I said, I would love to do a recital someday where the program is not announced ahead of time. The way that when in France, you go to certain restaurants where the chef.
Yeah.
And
you get what you get. And
because he goes to the market in the morning, and whatever is fresh, he buys and he makes it, and the people trust him that whatever he makes is going to be good.
Yeah.
And they don't know ahead of time.
Right.
And I think that element of surprise is something, and I wish orchestras would do that.
Yeah. Well, come on, your next recital, your next solo recital. I think just mystery recitals. I'll go. I'll be there. You take off at the end of every summer, which I think is well deserved. You have a really busy schedule, right? And you have this small little break where you don't practice flute.
Yeah.
It's really probably important for you to have that little hiatus.
Yeah.
I know they ask you at NFA to do something probably every year, right? And you turn it down. So do you think it's important in everyone's career at some point to be able to say no to stuff, to be able to turn things down that might not be working for you? Or do you think you kind of have to earn that right later in your career?
I've done that. I mean, I've always been superstitious. I did that the minute I got tenure in my first job. I mean, I think it's, I have colleagues, string players, and I think for string players it's different because it must be frustrating to be a section string player. Yeah. I couldn't do it. I'd rather play in a string quartet or teach. I wouldn't want to play in an orchestra. But, they do chamber music festivals, and for them it's important to feel that, they're playing. But for me, I get a lot of solo playing, you know, so I don't feel that I need to do that. And for me, it's important for the head to clear your head. And when I come back, then you're refreshed, and then you feel like playing.
Yeah.
But if you don't never stop, I think that you get tired. You know, not only physically but emotionally tired. And you're in the kind of work we do, you need to be able to be creative.
Yeah.
And if you never stop, the danger for me would be I would feel like I'm working on an assembly line or something, you know.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do that.
And not to get too personal, but do you have a family? Do you feel like that's a little bit of an escape too? And is it nice to have that time away to just focus on that?
Of course.
Yeah.
And you know, I noticed, and that's something that has helped me in my teaching, was that after I stopped, because now, I mean, when I first stopped, I would do it. The first summer I stopped for 3 weeks, and I was really nervous because I thought, am I going to remember how to play?
Yeah.
I mean, I never stopped for that long.
Yeah.
Now I stop for however long we have. So it could be 6 weeks, 7 weeks. I mean, that recital I did 3 years ago for the Flute Club was after, at the end of the first week we were working in September, and I had stopped for 6 weeks. So I started practicing 10 days before.
Wow.
But, I mean, I had rehearsed this stuff before, but what I noticed was that after you stop, your muscles are really relaxed.
Yeah.
And the sound is always good, which made me realize that to sound good, you should be relaxed.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when you play a lot, you don't notice it, but the muscles start to get tense. And, you know, so that's one reason. Another reason, I think it's also maybe to avoid getting things like tendonitis or things like that, you know, so that all the muscles.
Have you ever had to struggle with anything like that, or have you been lucky with?
No, I've been lucky.
Yeah, that's good.
And maybe it's because I've taken breaks every year since I started working.
Right.
I don't know if that's why, but I mean, that's not why I do it, but because I really feel that.
Yeah.
You know.
That's funny. The best audition I ever played was I practiced really hard, and then before I knew I had to do the audition, I had already booked a trip ahead of time. And I couldn't refund it, so I just went on the trip. I just put my flute away, and I said, you know what? I did everything I could do. Yeah. I'm gonna relax for a week, and then I'll come back and I'll just do the audition. And I felt great, and I felt very relaxed and confident because I did the work ahead of time, and then I could just take the week beforehand to relax. Yeah.
Well, that's why I always try to learn the repertoire for the next season in the spring.
Oh, interesting.
Before I go on vacation.
Yeah.
So I've played all that repertoire, so I have.
So you're just refamiliarizing yourself.
A peace of mind.
Yeah.
Because not thinking, am I going to play able to play this?
Right.
You don't want to think about that while you're on vacation.
No, I'm sure you don't. Do you get to escape anywhere when you go on vacations, or you just go home?
Yeah. Yeah. There's my father-in-law has a little cottage in Chautauqua, New York.
Oh, nice.
And we go there every summer for 3-4 weeks. And the same people go back, and there's a group of tennis players I know. And
you're an avid tennis player,
I play tennis almost every day. And then go to the lake, do some reading, which I don't have time to do during the year much. Yeah. So just a real a change of scenery.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I wouldn't want to be in New York City. The summer audition.
Summers are so terrible here.
For the Philharmonic.
Yeah.
It was in early July, and it was like 106 degrees. And they put me up in a hotel, and there were 2 air conditionings that were working full blast, and it was barely...
Not enough still.
Yeah, I mean, just...
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't want to be here in the summer.
No.
And we're lucky because the way the Philharmonic schedule works is that we're here until the middle of June, and we're not back until the middle of September.
Right.
So...
You miss all the gross stuff.
That's fine with me.
Yeah. I heard you also like to drive some fast cars too as a leisure activity.
I wonder who told you that.
I did my digging around.
You must have interviewed some of my former students.
Found some stuff. How'd that start for you? And do you have a collection of cars or just a favorite?
Well, it's a very modest collection.
Yeah.
But I have a Saab convertible. I have a BMW convertible. And my wife has a Mercedes. But I like European cars and I like sports cars. I like convertible. When the weather's nice, it's so great to go with the top down. And
I think where I found it was you were talking about after if you have like a frustrating rehearsal or something, you can get in your car and zip away. It's hard. You're very cool and collected. It's hard to imagine you getting very frustrated at rehearsal. Do you think you've always been that way?
Well, no, but it's if a conductor takes a slow tempi, for example,
it's frustrating.
Yeah, and you can't do anything about it. So then you drive home and then you just step on it.
Yeah. Well,
all right.
Thank you so much. It's
my
really
pleasure.
Been a treat.
My pleasure.
You can hear Robert perform at the Phil live throughout their season and also hear him on numerous recordings, including many well-known works in addition to the lesser-known treasures he's fond of. I was so thankful for Robert's generosity with his time and his openness to all of my questions. He is truly a flute icon, and we are lucky here in New York to call him one of our own. Thank you to Robert Langevin for the interview. Recordings from this episode featured the Franck Sonata for flute and piano, Rouse Flute Concerto, and Mozart Flute Concerto in D major. This has been an episode of Flute Unscripted. This podcast is sponsored by the Flute Center of New York. Visit our website at flutesforsale.com for the largest selection of new and pre-owned instruments. Remember to use this podcast promo code LISTEN for discounts on flutes and sheet music. Special thanks to our owner Phil Unger, the Flute Center team, and Stefan Huskoldson for our theme music.